Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lindsay, a member of the CK-12 team, and my colleague Ryan and I are going to be running today's webinar called Using Practice in Groups with Students. We are glad you're here with us today. Before I introduce you to Ryan, let's review how to use that Zoom, the chat window and the Q&A window. We have some active chat going already from people all around the world. Again, we're so excited you guys are here with us. The thing that you need to remember when you are chatting is that you need to switch your option from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. So several of you introduced yourselves, but you just sent it to panelists, so only the CK-12 team members here in the room are able to see that. So please send to all panelists and attendees if you want everybody to see what you're talking about in the chat window. The Q&A window is what we use throughout our presentation to keep an eye on what questions you have, what you might need to have demonstrated for you. We've got a lot of hands on deck today. Star, Katie, Nimish, you're going to see a lot of CK-12 team members trying to answer your questions. So as always, if you have any trouble with your sound or with video, also let us know that and we'll try to assist. A few reminders about the Certified Educator Program. This is kind of the end of week 2. So by now I think most of you know that if you are still needing to register for any upcoming sessions, we are going to take a break next week off for the 4th of July here in the USA, and then we're going to pick it back up the following week. So we still have two more weeks of sessions going on in July, and you can register for those at ck12.org/jumpstart. Any information that you're seeking regarding your assignments from previous sessions, or if you're needing to watch an archived video from one of the sessions that we've done, the program homepage at ck12.org/certified2017. That's where you find all that good information about the program. Just a reminder of kind of where today's session fits in. You know, a lot of you guys are tracking along a pathway. For certification, it doesn't matter if you are on a pathway, if you've customized your own experience, or if you're focusing on content or focusing on our intelligent learning systems. But using practice in groups with students is a session that we've designed. You know, hopefully some of you have joined our Groups in Practice 101, or you've attended the Customizing Practice session, and you have a good idea of how to use our practice tool and how to use groups. So Ryan is here today to tell you, okay, now that you know what our tool does, how do you use that effectively with students? What does that actually look like in the classroom? So he's going to give you some great ideas about how to use it in class, how students can use it out of class. But as you have questions about the actual practice tool, again, we have some team members here to try to facilitate those questions. So right now, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Ryan, who's going to get you started on today's content.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you to everyone who's joined us here today. In this webinar, we'll be covering the following topics. First, we'll take a look at the overview of CK-12's groups, just so we understand the difference between the two types of groups that we offer. Next, we'll take a look at strategies for using groups with your students in order to make the most of this resource that CK-12 offers. Next, we'll take a look at finding adaptive practice assignments so that you can easily identify the best tools to use with your students. And lastly, but most important, we'll be taking a look at strategies for using adaptive practice with your students, both in class and recommendations for out of class time as well. So our main goal is that by the end of this session, you'll have several usable strategies on how to use groups and adaptive practice to support student learning in your class. But before we get into the core content of this webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about you. You'll see a poll here in a few seconds that will prompt you to respond to a question. Knowing this information will help us tailor this webinar and deliver the most relevant content to you. The question is here to determine how familiar you are with our practice tool. This will give us more context for the examples and demonstrations in this webinar. So please let us know. Are you completely new to CK-12's adaptive practice? Have you used adaptive practice occasionally? Have you used adaptive practice frequently? Or are you really in there and customizing adaptive practice? So go ahead and take a moment to answer that question. All right, we'll just give everyone one more second to finish this question. All right, so let's take a look at these results. So it looks like most of you are fairly new to using CK-12's adaptive practice. Some of you have used it occasionally, and there are a couple brave among us that have used it frequently or have actually taken the time to customize it and could be experts to talk to for the rest of you in the audience. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the actual presentation for today. So we're going to start, like we said, by looking at a groups overview. So in terms of what the groups is, CK-12 offers the option to create study groups or classes. Why should I use it? Well, create class-wide assignments and share resources easily by using this tool. And where do I get it? Groups can be accessed by using the top toolbar anywhere on CK12.org. So now that we remember exactly what it is, let's take a look at strategies for specifically using the study groups function. So you can use study groups to help facilitate collaboration during student projects. You can also use the study groups to facilitate learning circles, which could help support all learners during the course of your class. You could also potentially use study groups with colleagues, and that this allows a great resource to share CK-12 resources with other educators. Now we'll take a look instead of using the study groups, but using the class groups. So study groups are a great way to share resources and promote collaboration, but classes give the extra functionality of creating assignments and viewing reports, which provide great additional benefits as a teacher. In terms of possible strategies, you could create class groups. So CK-12 classes allow a teacher to make separate groups for each of their classes to help monitor student progress. You could also develop these class groupings to allow for differentiated instruction. This could be a great way to support a group of students who may need additional or modified resources to best support their needs. You could also create a discussion board as an assignment. With the ability to notify, post something, and comment, students could post and then respond to another's as an assignment for your class. Last, you could use reports as a self-assessment tool for students. This would allow students to compare their time and scores for how they've done on assignments. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate how to look at this student self-assessment tool because we feel like it could be a very strong resource for students to identify their work. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here I am logged in on a student account. So I'm going to go into my groups, and I have a class group. Because remember, in a class group, that has the functionality of assignments and reporting. So I'm going to go into this physics class, period 1, where I've done a lot of my work as a student. And if I go ahead and click on this reports, I'll be able to see all of the work that I've done as a student. And so from this overview page, I can kind of see what things I've done, what things I haven't done, maybe assignments that I've struggled with. But I can actually get even into more detail. If I click into a particular assignment that I did, it will give me a breakdown of how I did on that particular assignment. So I can see here, I did really well on the easy questions and medium questions, but maybe some of the hard questions I still didn't do very well on. So I can go ahead and I can actually take a look at these questions that I did poorly on. So this is a great way for a student to kind of self-assess their own learning and really give them the control of their own process in your class. The second thing we wanted to show is now I'll log in as a teacher, and we'll take a look at what it looks like to have the different class groups so that you can share different resources to tailor to students' needs. So again, now I'm logged in as a teacher, and I'm going to go into my groups. So I'm going to see here that I have this physics class period 1, and I already have it set up with some members and some assignments. And I've even shared some resources. One of the resources I shared was actually a flex book that I felt was really good, tailored to my class. But let's say I have another group of students who I want to maybe give a little extra support to, because maybe I want to give them some additional resources, or I want to give them some additional assignments. What I can actually do is, let's say I go into another class, and in this class, I can go ahead and add students as soon as I'm ready to do that. But if I go into the assignments, I'll actually see all of my assignments from other groups that I have, or I could create new assignments. And since CK-12 has content from all across the board, maybe if you're teaching physics, maybe a physical science type assignment could be a better resource for a student who's struggling on a particular topic. Also, under the shared resources, it's a great place that I've heard that teachers have shared flexbooks with their classes, because it's an easy access point. So let's say I went ahead and go into my library, and I have actually created and customized this physics flexbook that I feel will be really useful for students who might otherwise struggle with harder language. So I can go ahead and I can say share to groups, and I can share it directly to that group of students who I identified as maybe needing an additional resource in order to support their learning. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's now shared it to that period. So if I go ahead and go back to that class group that I've created under shared resources, right here is a direct access point for students to take a look at that flexbook that I've shared with them.
Ryan, we just had a question that says, can you share to subgroups within a group?
Great question. So at this time, you want to create separate groups. So let's say, like what we were just talking about, let's say I had a physics class and I create a group. I would recommend creating another group in order to help solve the problem that you're trying to do.
Okay, we've had a lot of questions just related to the Certified Educator program come in, and that's great. I think Katie and Star have answered a lot of those questions. We're looking for you guys to continue to ask us things about groups and practice here. So Ryan, we just had a user ask us again the difference between classes and groups. Maybe hit on that one more time of how they decide which one's best for their needs.
Sure. So let me go ahead back here and actually go back to the main groups page where I would create a group. So if I click on this plus right here, this is where it gives me the option to create a group. And like we've talked about, there are two different types of group distinctions. There is the study group, which essentially allows me to share resources. You could have a discussion board going, and you could have members kind of share their resources is the main goal of the study group. As we mentioned with the class, it gives you that additional functionality to give assignments and to allow students to track their work using the reporting feature. So the big difference is that the class has the ability to assign assignments and to look at the reporting feature.
A question from a user, can students be put in multiple classes and groups?
Yes, so students can be put into multiple classes and groups. The easiest way to join a group, so if you can either go into a group, and each group actually has a code that's used to help the students join into that particular group. So if I go into here and I click add students, so I could either invite students by email. You could actually find existing students. So let's say you already have that case where you have students in multiple groups. This is a great way where you could do that. You can also, let's say that your students don't use email. You could actually create accounts for them as well and give them an account and login credentials as an alternative way of making an account.
Okay, great questions, and please keep them coming. But right now, I'm going to steal the screen back, and we're going to transition to the next section that's going to talk a little bit more about our adaptive practices. So let me... here we are. Kick it back over to Ryan.
Great. So the next topic that we want to focus on, now that we've looked a little bit at the study groups and class groups, is actually the adaptive practice itself. So first, we'll just look at an overview. So what is it? Adaptive practice is a digital assessment tool that adapts to student input. Why should I use it? It gives you access to 150,000 and more questions and reports on assigned work. Where do I get it? In addition to the website, there's actually a free CK-12 app available for all smartphones and tablets. This is a great option. Let's say students are on the bus coming to school that day. They could even do their assignment at that point. So what we want to look at now that we kind of remember what adaptive practice is and why it's valuable is how am I going to find the best adaptive practice assignment to use with my class? So in order to effectively use CK-12's adaptive practice, it's important to know where to find the best assignment. There are two ways that I would recommend in order to easily find and create assignments. The first one is if you go to a class groups page and you are on the assignments portion, you will see the ability to create an assignment. This is the quickest way to assign adaptive practice. Another way that you could use would be to go and first preview the questions by using the browse concept function to identify a topic first and then look at the corresponding practice before assigning it. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly share my screen so that I can show you how to do these two different methods of finding practice assignments. So first of all, like we said, if I'm on I'm on a class group, if I go into my assignments, right here is an easy way I can just click create an assignment. I can then browse to the topic that is most relevant to me. I used to teach physics, so I'm going to say something that's true and dear to my heart. I'm going to click on momentum, and I'll see here that it tells me that every concept with practice is designated by this blue eye. So if I go ahead and I say, I want to give this assignment on momentum, I would just click here. I have this assignment. I want to save it so that I can give it a name. And I want to assign it to this group. And let's say I want the due date to be 2 weeks from now. And it really is that easy. So now I have created an assignment on momentum practice that my students will see who are in this group, and they'll know that it has a due date of July 14th. But let's say we want to go ahead and find another way because I want to actually preview those questions. So I'm going to go to the browse page.
Hang on, Ryan. There's a conversation happening in chat. Let me see if it's us or if it's them. Because it looks like some people are having trouble seeing the screen or that it's frozen. We're seeing it on our end, but maybe, Ryan, why don't you try sharing your screen again? And
Sure.
we'll make sure it's not us. Sorry, everybody. Because everybody in the room is seeing it here. Okay, because what you're looking at is a physics class page, and Ryan is navigating and using his mouse. Let's try it and see if we have better luck here.
All right, so hopefully we have solved your problem by resharing that screen. So like we were talking about, I wanted to show you an additional way to try and find an adaptive practice assignment that would be best. So I'm going to go ahead.
We're just going to have him switch to what's showing actually right now. Looks like the student account. So we're just going to have him switch over and share the opposite application, and that's where you'll probably get to see kind of the work that he's doing from that. So once again, sorry about that glitch. We'll have that show the accurate piece, and you should be all set.
All right, so now hopefully you can all see my screen. I'm sorry for that inconvenience. So we're going to take a look at going by the browse function. So if I go to the main CK-12 page, and if I scroll down to where I see my subjects, I'm going to show all subjects, for example, because I want to show an algebra assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and go into algebra, and let's say I'm interested in doing a potential assignment on number lines. If I go to number lines, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to look for the adaptive practice assignment. So I see this adaptive practice assignment, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And I'll see here that I have this ability to assign it to my class, which is going to be really useful in a second if I decide that I do like this assignment for my students. But something useful about looking at practice assignments this way is that I can actually preview the assignments quite easily. So I can go in and I can actually see, are these the types of questions that I want to be using with my students? And then after a while, if I decide that this is actually what I want, if I just click this go back, I'll be taken straight back to this page where I now have the ability to assign it to my class. At this point, since I'm not in a particular class group, I would have to choose the specific classes that I want to assign this to. So again, I wanted to assign this to that new class that I was looking at, which is my physics class P2. And let's say I want to assign this one for August 4th. So I go ahead and click assign. And just as easy, I've also created this assignment. But in this view, I was able to actually go ahead and preview those questions quite easily. So now we're going to go ahead and move on with our presentation. And we want to go into some actual strategies. And then after we look at some strategies, we will take another break so that we can answer some questions and do some demonstrations.
Okay, let me steal the screen back. Again, thank you for all of you who were reporting, that you were having trouble seeing. We appreciate you guys alerting us if there's something we need to do differently on our end. Let me take the screen back to our presentation. And let's talk about some of those strategies.
Great. So we're going to take a look at some strategies for how we could actually use this adaptive practice during our class time. So one way that could be really effective is you could use this as a formative assessment or a warm-up. So adaptive practice could be used as a really effective pre-assessment when starting a new unit. This could help give a general survey of student understanding before starting a new topic. You could also use it as a section or unit review. You can create an assignment with multiple sections, and you could even potentially add a quiz if this is beneficial. You could also use it as an adaptive comprehension check for each student on any device. So remember that CK-12's adaptive practice could be used on a mobile device. So this could be a great way to do it as an exit ticket. Let's say you finished a lesson and you want to assess student understanding of a particular topic. They could just pull out their device and they could actually log on to practice and they could do that assignment right there to see and get immediate feedback of how they're understanding a topic. Another strategy that we really like is this idea of students could develop custom questions. So with this idea, you could have students design their own questions that require open responses. These questions could then be used by the teacher to input custom questions to form a CK-12 quiz that could be used as a portion of a test, which we feel could improve student buy-in. As an alternative, students could also make questions with hints that could be used by other class sessions in the future. Adding the hints could really be a nice high-level task for the students when they're creating these questions. Lastly, we feel that the adaptive practice tool could be an effective way to implement competency-based learning. Since CK-12's adaptive practice is interested in completing assignments rather than really harking on the percentage you get right, it's more focused on student comprehension of a topic. So we feel it could be a really effective way to encourage competency-based learning in your classroom. So at this time, we're actually going to take a look at a video featuring Rhonda Stevens describing how she feels that the adaptive practice tool is highly valuable for ensuring students understand each topic fully.
I have gone in and I have selected the skills that I want the students to work with, and they think, well, they have to answer 10 questions per skill correctly to move on, which is great because they know they have to answer 10 questions. It's not based on points, so when they miss one, they don't have to start over, or they don't have to do 15 to make up for the one that they missed. They know, okay, let me figure out what I did wrong. I've only got to answer 10. They don't know, but I know that they're going to see that same type problem again and have to get it correct before they're allowed to move on. So I like that about it. I know nothing's being skipped, nothing's being left out, and they're truly mastering that concept before they're allowed to move on.
All right, thanks, Rhonda. So now let's go ahead and take a look at a couple more strategies, and then again, we'll pause to answer all of your great questions that you have. So these are some strategies you could potentially use outside of class. Something that's really effective about CK-12's adaptive practice is the ability to identify gaps. So if you take a look at this picture, this shows that practice can actually recommend remediation topics that can help find previous gaps in knowledge required for understanding a topic. Since our adaptive practice system is linked to all subject matter, it can easily recommend prerequisite concepts that a student may have a weak foundation in. This could also be an effective way to do absent work. Any students who are absent can still easily make up their content using CK-12. If you remember, their assignments can easily be accessed via mobile or web. A third strategy would be using it as a responsive homework assignment. CK-12's adaptive practice can be used as an effective homework where students get specific access to targeted resources to help them when struggling, or access to harder questions when doing successfully on a homework assignment. Another idea could be used as a summer assignment. Practice assignments can contain multiple topics, which can be used to easily create a summer assignment or review for your students. The report will then show student performance on each section separately. CK-12 actually offers its own summer program called BrainFlex. This program is an 8-week summer learning program that encourages students to practice a different topic each day throughout the summer. The great thing about this particular program is that it's actually managed by CK-12, and so it would do assigning the topics for you. So at this time, we're going to take a break to show a couple of demonstrations based on these ideas, and then we'll answer more of your questions. So the first demonstration that we're going to look at is this idea of having students be able to use this self-study feature to identify their own gaps. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I want to make sure I'm logged in as a student. So now I'm logged in as a student. I'm going to go ahead and share my window with you guys. So I think something that is useful that doesn't often get found is our self-study feature for students. This is a great way, let's say, if you have a student who you think could use a little bit of additional practice and use the benefit knowing that the adaptive practice is able to identify those maybe misconceptions that they have from previous content. So as a student, if I go into my groups, I'll actually see, if I go into my dashboard, you'll actually see there's an option of self-study. And for this self-study, it's a great way for a student who might be interested in potentially getting ahead and learning more material, or like we said, for a student who potentially could use some additional help. I can actually choose any subject that CK-12 offers, and it has the direct access to all of our adaptive practice. And remember, the adaptive practice is linked to all other CK-12 resources. So if a student is struggling with a particular topic, it will recommend a read, a video, an interactive, some way of helping them to understand that content. The other thing I wanted to show you is this idea of the summer program, in case that might be something of interest to your students. We all hate that dreaded summer slide where the students come back and we feel like we have to reteach them everything that we did last year. And so the BrainFlex could be a great way to encourage students to continue learning over summer. On our homepage right now, since it is summer, you can actually see Brainy up here in the corner. If I click on that, it will actually take me to the place where I can register for BrainFlex. Another way that students could access this is if they just click up here on their profile. When BrainFlex is being offered, you'll actually see BrainFlex as an option right here. Like we mentioned, BrainFlex is an 8-week program that will continually encourage your students to practice over the summer so that they keep their learning relevant.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here in the Q&A. Well, we have a request to, again, maybe go back to that. So the screen was off when you navigated accessing practices via the class groups and create assignments. Why don't you go ahead and show that again, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So let me go ahead and log in as a teacher. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now that I'm logged in as my teacher account. A way you can always tell if you're logged in as a student or a teacher, if you look at the top of the screen, it will actually say like switch to teacher or switch to student. So that's just a way of understanding what account you're on. So for me, I'm on a teacher account at this time. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you sorry that was off the screen at that time. I'm gonna go into my groups. And if I go into my groups, there is a portion of the groups where it's called assignments. If I click on assignments, I'll see this orange button here that tells me I can create an assignment. If I click on this, I can navigate to whatever subject I want. Then it will show me topics. And as we mentioned earlier, any topic that has a blue eye next to it says it is a concept that includes CK-12's adaptive practice. So let's say I'm particularly interested in order of operations. If I just check order of operations here, and now I go ahead and click save, CK-12 is actually recommending an additional topic that I could assign. But at this time, let's say I'm not interested in that. I just want to click next. And this is my assignment on order of operations. I'm going to go ahead and click save. I'm going to choose the class. I'm going to choose a due date. So let's say this one, I want it to be due on August 7th. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now that I've done that, I'll actually see that assignment I just created right here on order of operations, and it has been assigned to my class. So when I'm doing this, I'm assigning the adaptive practice. Remember, with the adaptive practice, it is linked to other resources that students can access. But when I'm going up here and I'm saying create an assignment, I'm creating an adaptive practice assignment.
Okay, we had another question that says, sometimes it's difficult for students to recognize their gaps. You mentioned it earlier of how is the CK-12 adaptive practice tool used by teachers to identify the gaps that students might have?
Great. So something that the CK-12 adaptive practice system does is, let's say, for example, I was assigning this topic of order of operations. So the adaptive practice system, since it's linked to a lot of content, maybe a student is struggling with addition, and the adaptive practice system notices that. If the student gets a couple of questions wrong, it will actually take a moment, stop, and say, hey, why don't you go ahead and try these questions and see if this might be an area in which you don't quite understand the material. If that ends up to be the case, CK-12's adaptive practice will then refer them to that concept in order to refresh maybe the basic addition skills that they need at that point. So that's something that the adaptive practice system is going to do based on the way that it's designed. And so it's mainly a resource to help benefit the students in that regard.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions about creating assignments and giving it a due date. So here are the two questions, Ryan. It says, Ryan explained how to create an assignment and give it a due date, but I see that he created many assignments that are not given a due date yet. How do you save this list and wait to assign later? And then the second part of that, I guess, is can students work on assignments after the due date? So, explain how CK-12 works with these dates.
Yeah, great questions. So for the first question, if I go in here and I create an assignment and then I don't give it a due date, it will be saved into my database of assignments, and that is accessible across all of my groups. So any assignment that I've created, so let's see, this is a assignment on rocks and rock types. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And right here, I've been clicking this button that says assign to this group physics class P2. But if I don't click that, then at this time, I've just created an assignment, but I haven't actually given it to my students at that time. So that would be what you were seeing when I had these assignments created, but they weren't actually assigned to this particular class. They might have been assigned to another class, and that's why they would be showing in that feature. In terms of the due date, I can leave the due date blank if I wanted to. And in terms of the question on can students access assignments past the due date, yes, they can. On their interface, it will show them that the assignment is overdue, but we're not going to restrict them from doing that assignment.
I'm actually going to jump in for a second, just because I stumbled across one of my examples where, as a student, I was overdue. So why don't I actually just show you what that looks like from a student page? So when they access a concept, so hopefully you can see here that apparently this student is being a little delinquent in getting their work done. And so here you'll see that this real number assignment was assigned to the student, and they have not accessed that read yet, so it's marked as overdue. They haven't accessed this Plix and started to answer some of the questions, so that's marked overdue. And then this practice says I have a 70%. So not overdue in that I worked on it, but I haven't hit my goal of 100, so I'd want to consider maybe finishing that up to get that goal of 100. But that's definitely, an interesting piece in terms of seeing, like, from a student perspective, if they're accessing a concept from that concept page, they can clearly see what's overdue. And then that way they can kind of jump forward and tell what they're working
on. A question, Katie says, if the assignment is past due, does it tell the teacher that things were completed late? Is that indicated on the teacher report at all, or does it just show up as a completed assignment?
I think the last time that we did this, we had marked when this question came up earlier, and we've added it to our request list. For now, a teacher could kind of access their report when it was due and see, and it looks like it's now showing up as being overdue in that part from there.
Yes, one of our engineers just weighed in and said that it will be shown, that there's an icon that shows the assignment as late. So that's awesome. That's a more recent development, because we know you guys who are accessing teacher reports, that information might be important to the way you operate your classroom to know whether it was turned in late or not. So Ryan, back to you. Maybe you could knock out a question on about assigning adaptive practice. So you're talking about using it through groups and classes. Can I assign adaptive practice by sending its URL via email or posting it to my class page on my LMS? Is that an option for people?
Great question. So CK-12 does work with a variety of LMSs, and we could actually see that if you just go to the homepage of CK-12. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we can go ahead and take a look at the homepage. we'll see that we actually do interact really well with a variety of LMSs. And if you go ahead and let's say you're using an LMS such as Canvas or Edmodo, we do have apps within those LMSs where you can assign practice assignments. However, with the use case you were talking about, where let's just say I go ahead and I go to adaptive practice and I copy the link and I paste it, well, if I did not assign that assignment to my students, then I will not have the ability to see the reporting feature. So if I want to see how my students are doing on an assignment, it would be really important that I assign it in some way, either through CK-12's groups, or I could do it through one of these LMS options. But I want to make sure I assign it if I want that ability to see the reports.
Okay, two questions related to the questions that are in the adaptive practice. One says, can I preview the practice when using this method to assign? And then another user asked, if you preview a practice assignment and disagree with the answer, can it be removed or edited for your students? So how do they preview? How can they make changes?
Yeah, great questions. So like we said, we showed this one method earlier that I recommended if you wanted to preview the questions. So for example, let's say I wanted to preview the questions and I want to teach algebra. So if I go ahead and I go into algebra, and then let's say I'm interested in this idea of multi-step equations. If I go into multi-step equations, I can see here that there is a practice assignment. So if I go ahead and I click on this practice assignment, I will see that I have the ability to preview at this point. I would really recommend that that's a good way to go about it if you want to go ahead and preview those questions. Some LMSs also do offer this option to preview the assignments before you assign them to your class. Through the groups function, if you assign it, you would need to go back and preview it after. So the best way I would really recommend is by going and browsing to the concept, and then I could actually go ahead and preview that concept. In terms of when you were saying, like, let's say I don't like a particular question. If I don't like a particular question, as a teacher, I do have the ability to actually customize the practice assignment. But remember, as soon as I customize a practice assignment, it then becomes a quiz. And so it loses the adaptive feature, but it will then give me the ability to have all of the control over the questions that are in my quiz. So I can go in here and I can see that in multi-step equations, there is this bank of 142 questions. And out of that, right now, this quiz is going to assign 20 of them. Even further, if I go into that particular bank, I can see all of the questions that are listed, and I can decide whether or not I like each of these questions to assign to my students. If I feel that I really want to create some of my own questions, I can actually go ahead, click Add Question, and I can write my own questions. And we have 7 different question types, including fill in the blanks, matching, multiple choice, true, false, short answer. So this gives me the ability to add my own questions if I want to supplement a resource that CK-12 already provides.
We had a user asked to see an example of a student report. I think Katie pulled up a student report to show you.
Let me share my screen there. And so if we actually looked at the practice for this particular assignment, so you can see what they were working on, if they had submitted it, then once they're done, they'll see kind of the same thing that you would see from a teacher perspective. So this is the student account. They see that they have 7 correct, they had a streak of 3, they only spent 4 minutes on this. They actually get to see additional ways to learn as well. And then they get the same report information that their teacher had in terms of the level of questions that they had and some of the answers that they had in there. Or actually, let me rephrase that, all of the answers that they put in there. So you can definitely see the same content within there. If I accessed kind of my groups and said, okay, I'm in certain groups, what's happening? I'm a member of this. And I can see my grades from here as well. And so you could kind of go through and say, okay, well, how am I doing? What's happening? Oh, it looks like I haven't done a number of my assignments, but I'm accessing this piece right here. So mass, matter, and volume. And then, this is a different one, but you get the same idea. So I could go to that, or I could review my answers within the groups feature or within the practice option itself. And just to note that I know we had a couple of questions about kind of what shows up where and how that works. The practice itself, so anything that's an adaptive practice, which means that a student is accessing the concept from CK-12 and you as a teacher haven't customized it, their goal is 10 correct. So that 20% is out of 10 correct. If you made a quote unquote quiz or a customized assignment, whether or not you used it for a quiz, that percentage would be based on the number of questions you chose to include within that assignment. And then your other assignments show up, so your reads and your videos, those are just basically complete or incomplete. The same deal with your interactives, complete or incomplete when they work on it. So the ones that get percentages are your practice or your quizzes where they're actually answering questions in that environment.
Okay, another question that we're sitting on here is just a clarification question. So are all assignments considered adaptive practice? If you assigned a read, would that be adaptive practice? So Ryan, maybe you could again talk about what the functionality of our adaptive practice is and how that differs from other things that you can assign.
Sure. So why don't I go ahead and I'll share my screen again as a teacher account. And we'll answer that question for you. So let's say, I think a good way of answering this question would be, if I go into a particular topic, let's say I go into biology, for example, and let's say that I go into this topic of proteins. So on proteins, I can see all of these different resources that CK-12 offers me. So there are reads, there are Plix, which is our interactive content, there's videos, there's lesson plans, and then there's our adaptive practice. So when it comes to the practice, the adaptive practice is the assignment in which students have the opportunity to go in, they have the ability to engage with questions, they can use the scratch pad, they can get hints, but it's meant to be this environment where it's asking them questions and it's acting as a learning environment. Compared to our other content, like you were mentioning, our read content, we would not consider that adaptive practice assignments. It could be linked to the adaptive practice assignment. So for example, if I go back into this adaptive practice assignment for a second, and let's say I click submit, at the bottom of that assignment, it will always offer me these additional ways of learning. So as a student, I could go in and I could actually access these additional types of modalities. So the reads, the videos, the interactive content from the adaptive practice. But the adaptive practice is actually this environment where I'm going through as a student, I'm answering questions, and it is adapting to how I'm doing. So it could get harder or easier depending on my progress.
Okay, we have some questions about BrainFlex that Ryan referenced earlier. I think, Katie, you were going to pull it up and show people a few more details about how to get involved with BrainFlex this summer.
Sure. So if we pull this up, then you can see kind of I'm on that student account. So if you're on a student account, you'll see Brainy up in the top left. That's probably the easiest way to access that. And it says to join our free summer program. And so if you're going to do that, it bumps you to our summer page where you can say, I accept the challenge. And then you can pick your subject. So as a student who's choosing to do this individually, they can say, let's say I want to do an algebra and maybe practice some life science before I get in there. And then I have the option to add a coach. So the nice thing about that is that, I know a lot of teachers don't know who their students are or what that looks like. And so maybe that coach you guys could do as a department or kind of a general email, or they could just have a relative or a friend kind of keep them on track as they're working. So all options for who they add as their coach for that piece, but then they put the coach's email and notice kind of like, is this a teacher or parent or a friend that's working with them or other? And then enable daily notifications would remind them kind of if they're using that practice app on their phone to work on this, what that looks like, and kind of pop it up and say, hey, you haven't done any practice today, maybe spend 5 minutes doing something. So that would be from a student perspective. If I did that from a teacher perspective, you could go in and you could invite students to that. Let's go back one more page. Let's see if I can trick the system into not adding my subjects in. Okay, I'm gonna switch over so you can see it from the teacher side, just so you can, it's not reading the same system. So let me switch to that other account. And if I went in here, and my homepage generally as a teacher, right now it's showing the Certified Educator program. So you could just switch to the student version to pull up that Brainy. And once you click on there, you could then say, okay, well, instead of being a student, I'm actually a teacher. So I want to invite students to do this. There's also a flyer there option, a letter to parents. But if you were going to invite students, you'd add them in and say, hey, why don't you check this out? And that would prompt them to kind of sign up and go from there. So those are both options, whether you're coming from the student perspective or coming from the teacher perspective, to kind of access that program and encourage them to stay on track.
Several follow-up questions to BrainFlex came in. The first general one is this just a summer program, or does this go throughout the school year? You know, is it only for summer, or can we assign during break or inclement days? So again, maybe of what our philosophy is on BrainFlex, but then what they could do with our adaptive practice tool throughout the year.
Yeah, so BrainFlex is set up to be specifically a summer program, and yes, we know that that is a US-centric time frame summer program. But the idea is that our adaptive practice can be assigned at any point in time. And a student could really go in and do any of that practice at any point in time on their phone, on a tablet. So if you want to just say, hey, you need to do, 5 different topics this week that you're off, or, show me your report on your phone, like that you did X during this day off or something like that. So our adaptive practice as a whole is kind of that option for self-paced student learning and or assignments from teachers throughout any point in time. Whereas BrainFlex is that option for saying, okay, during this set period of time, we know that students are between teachers and maybe they're not getting as much of that support or that guidance from there. And so we wanted to create a program that would allow them to access that and really challenge them to work even during the summer.
Do you know, we had a kind of a question / suggestions, I think asking about, can students see, or can teachers see how students are interacting with BrainFlex? Do you know if the reporting is similar from what the teachers can view? I don't even know if you know this, Katie, because the suggestion is just how that would be helpful to see, how long students are taking on each individual section, if that's not currently part of our reporting system.
So I think the last time I used BrainFlex was about a year ago. So I would have to double check that and get back to you in terms of exactly what is being seen on there. And maybe one of our developers that is more recently worked on it can answer that. But you're going to want to make sure that if you are looking to see sort of any encouragement or any progress on the student, that you invite them and kind of become their coach or have them sign up with you as a coach. And so that way, you can make sure that you can kind of encourage them as they're working through that program. If you're not linked to them at all for BrainFlex, then you wouldn't see any kind of work done specifically for BrainFlex. But if they accessed a concept for BrainFlex that you had also assigned, then you would see that in your standard report piece.
Okay, I think right now I'm going to take control of the screen again, and as we're approaching the hour mark here, I want to make sure that I send you guys off with your assignments. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and then of course we're going to stay on and answer any of the questions that you guys still have. So for your assignment, again, this has been all about using practice in groups with students. We want you guys to, those of you who are doing the Certified Educator program, we want you to go through a bunch of different sections on accessing practice and quizzes, groups and practice for homework, groups and practice for class time, and then even kind of thinking ahead towards using CK-12 to the max. So how you're going to access this assignment is through the tiny URL /CEP17 AP students. So Certified Educator Program 17 Advanced Practice students is what we have in mind there. I believe is going to be chatted in the window, that link. You guys can write it down right now. We're always getting questions from people of, hey, I missed that assignment link. Where can I find the assignment? And the best place for you to do that is on our Certified 2017 page. If you haven't been on this page since you registered for this program, when you go to ck12.org/certified2017, you're going to see information about all of the individual sessions. You're going to find your assignments there, and then you're also going to see an archived webinar section at the bottom where you can rewatch or watch for the first time any of the sessions that you may have missed. So as always, we have one link that we're using all summer long, where anytime you attend a webinar and you want to give us some feedback, whether that's things that we did well, that went really well for you as the learner, or things that we can do to improve this program. Again, we're getting ready to wrap up 2 of our 4 weeks of the summer program. So we're going to regroup next week and review all of your feedback and make sure that, you know, we're doing the best programming we can in July. So this is not your assignment, this is not mandatory, but we do appreciate any feedback that you guys feel like contributing. So CEP 2017 feedback. At this point, I think those of you who need to head off of this webinar, we can say goodbye to you now. Do know that you can email support@ck12.org at any time. Also, if you're a social media user, there's quite a bit of activity and professional networking happening there right now on Twitter, perhaps on Facebook. You can @CK12 Foundation or hashtag CK12 Foundation to tag us in anything you might be posting. So if you have program information, keep typing it in the Q&A window, or any questions about practice in groups. So I'm going to send it back to Katie, who's going to address more of these questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. So we had kind of 2 related questions. Was one, will you have a webinar on the apps? My son is using the CK-12 app for Earth Science right now, and he discovered that the adaptive practice linked to the reading and videos. So cool. So thanks so much for kind of that comment. We love to see people using it in there. And then related to that also, like, do those reading assignments or video assignments show up in the CK-12 practice app? I know that at least the reading ones do. They would have to access it through their assignments piece within that practice app. If they're just kind of browsing, they're most likely just seeing the adaptive practice options. But you can kind of access other pieces of that through the assignments, as well as, you know, through those recommended pieces within that. So definitely check those out. And I think we'll consider, we always build our summer webinars based on some great comments and questions from the year. So maybe we'll do a short one that's specifically on the apps, but that practice app works the same basically as our online practice. So that's why we were demoing it in that regard.
Maybe could one of you, Katie or Ryan, do you want to pull up that Certified 2017 page and share it? Because we have a lot of program questions that have come in. Is there a place on the certified page where I can see my progress towards certification? No, we wish, actually. That's kind of on our request list for next summer. We would love for you guys to have your own dashboard where you could see what you're registered for, and like what sessions you've attended and assignments you've completed. It does not exist this summer. So you have your individual registration confirmation emails that Zoom sent you when you signed up. You get our 24-hour ahead of time and hour before reminder emails, and then you get an assignment receipt from Google Forms when you complete your assignment. So know that we are tracking all that through our database. So we have a record of your attendance, we have a record of your assignments you've submitted, and hopefully, you know, next year we could make that more user-facing for you to track. Let's see, some other program questions. Let's see, what is the last date for submitting all the assignments to get the certification? we're hoping that you're doing the assignments pretty quickly after you attend your webinar sessions, just to keep them relevant. We've kind of loosely tagged our week suggestion to that. We have sessions going through July 21st, I think is the end date of our last session. And then we are going to be compiling the data at that point based on your final completion form that you send us to see who has met the requirements for the Certified Educator program. So what is the final date? I don't even know that we've really discussed that internally. I would think by, probably a week after the program has wrapped, by the end of July, we're going to need that information from anybody who's wanting to be certified. So end of July would be my answer to the when do we need to have assignments finished.
So just to kind of piggyback on that idea, in terms of submitting it, you're welcome to access those assignments later. If there's, sections that if you did your 2 required ones and 5 others in a custom pathway or something like that, those assignments are still going to be available to see, so that you can actually go in and say, well, now that I have time to watch this recording, what questions were they asking to help me kind of use CK-12 better? And we really tried to design those assignments for you more than for us as we're working through. So I encourage you to check them out if there's one that you attended but you didn't have time to do it now, or that you're watching later. But that kind of end date is more so that we can wrap up all program logistics and not have people slowly turning them in over the course of the next 6 months or so. Today's afternoon session or evening session or morning session for tomorrow, for any of you elsewhere, is our Maximizing Learning session. So that is our wrap up for the program. And in addition to a number of guests that we'll have on there to talk about their experience, we will go through the logistics of the final pieces of paperwork and things that you need to fill out there. So since those are required, we figured we'd kind of keep them all in one clean place at the end there. So definitely join us for that piece, and you will fill out the final information and send it to us with your request, and then we will process accordingly. So we have a question on customized practice that I'm going to just answer for a second. It says, for an original quiz, which is your customized practice, do I need to just check the questions that I authored and uncheck the CK-12 questions? You can use a combination of whatever that is, and that means that you can kind of choose some of the CK-12 questions and some of your authored ones, or all of your authored ones, or you don't have to use any authored ones. But any question that you want to show up on that customized practice, you would need to click, and any one that you didn't, you would unclick as you worked your way through. So it looks like we are now seeing those courses from the pathways. As we said, for the pathways, they're really just suggestions to help you think about a way to approach accessing CK-12. So we tried to kind of create ones that were focused on Flexbooks, ones that were focused on our practice system, and then allow you to kind of mix and match as you chose.
Okay, so I think 2 questions still related to today's content. I don't know if this is still relevant, but somebody a while ago asked, how do you get to preview all the questions? Says, whoa, I missed it. How do you get to preview all the questions? And then when you authorize a question, does it stay in your test bank library? So Ryan, are you okay to maybe you can leave the certified page and get back to previewing the questions? And then how does this interface with the test bank and the idea of the library?
Sure. So I'll go ahead and show you how I got to that preview interface that I think is an easy way of doing it. So if I go ahead and I go to the subject that I'm interested in assigning an adaptive practice assignment for. So let's say for the sake of this, let's say I'm going into analysis. And then if I go into analysis, I would click on the concept that I want. So let's say quadratic functions, for example. And under quadratic functions right here, I have this practice. So if I go ahead and click on that practice, right here I can see that I have this ability to preview. So that's the easiest way, I would say, to get to this preview function, is to go through the browse of the subject that I want, go into the individual concept, and then click on the practice assignment and click on preview. That would be my recommendation for how to get to that point. And can you repeat what the other question was?
It says when you authorize a question, does it stay in your test bank library?
So when you're authoring questions, you'll be able to see them within that concept. So all of the questions are tied to a concept. So if I authored questions for quadratic functions, then when I was customizing that, I'd be able to see questions that I authored as well as questions that CK-12 had authored. But I wouldn't see questions for quadratic functions in a different concept. So if you are customizing, you need to kind of add that concept to be able to pull up those questions. And kind of go from there. So just be aware that they're per concept, not necessarily a general place that you're pulling from.
Okay, so a follow-up, Ryan, to what you just demoed. We have a request that the question wasn't quite answered. You showed a whole list of all the questions. How do you get to the list of all the questions in the practice at once?
So our practice is tagged by concept, as I was just explaining. There isn't a way for you to access all 150,000 questions kind of in the database and just see them all in one place, because they're really built to be within that concept. So here you can see you have the quadratic function option, and then Ryan's demoing and showing you that you can say, okay, I want to add another concept from here, and it tells you how many questions you have options for. And you can add those in as another concept within your quiz. So because of the way that we broke it down into concepts and really said we want students to have skill levels at that value and not just say, you're going to get served up any of 150,000 questions across 3 different subject areas at the same time, that's the way that you would access the questions within our system. So by concept, not all questions together.
Okay, so Carol, you can let us know if we covered your question that time, or if we still need to do some clarification. We had a request for explanation on what the improve this question in the bottom of the preview question does. What does that actually do?
Great. So let me go ahead and go back to the adaptive practice interface so we can see what we're referring to. So let's say, for example, you do happen to find a question where maybe there's a typo or you feel that the question could be in some way improved. This is the opportunity for you as a user to help do your due diligence to improve it for the rest of the CK-12 community. So you can go ahead and choose, like, let's say, this question had a typo. I could go ahead and I can type in that information, click submit. It would be submitted to our support queue so that we would actually go ahead, look at that question and take a look at the comment that you made and use that to try and make an improvement for the question if it's necessary.
Okay, another question, if I customize a quiz, can I include the answer in a key so it is graded when students take it?
So you could create a question type where it evaluates the answer for you. So you could even use like variables that would in the answer where it would evaluate based on that variable that you're using. You could also do like multiple choice question types, or you could do true false question types, things like that the system would be able to evaluate. Things like short answer, and when you have more extended response, obviously our system is not going to be able to evaluate those types of questions for you.
Okay, then a question about certification program could have been linked into a group on CK-12. This might be referencing earlier when we were talking about how we wish our program had a dashboard, or maybe linking between our certification program and CK-12. That's definitely something we'll be exploring. Oh wait, Ryan wants to jump in here.
I was just going to reference to the cafe. So we do have a place where you could continue a dialogue if you are part of the Certified Educator Program. So we do have the Jumpstart corners for all the different states. And so in general, right here, this Jumpstart for Educators is our place where you could talk about your experiences with your professional development this summer. So this would be a good place if you wanted to talk to anybody or identify any questions you might have. This could be another valuable resource for you.
We have one last question in our queue right now. So if you have any other ones, get them in while I'm explaining this particular piece. But let me just share my screen for a second. It was about that how to start customizing piece. So if you're in here and you pick a topic and you click on kind of any assessment that you're working on, within the teacher component, you'll see the option to customize that practice on the left-hand side. If you're accessing it from a concept page, it would be right above the practice if you were accessing it from our browse option. And all you would do is just click that customize button on the left-hand side or right above it, and then it would give a little pop-up screen for making a quiz, and it would bump you to your quiz. So that's how you get started. If you're looking for all of the nitty-gritty pieces about that, then I definitely recommend you join our Customizing CK-12 or practice webinar, which we'll offer again in July, or watch the recording of that, because a good portion of that webinar was going into all of these little pieces on how that works.
Okay, our Q&A list is empty. So unless anything comes in here, oh, we got something. Can you click on the questions? It will show all the questions. Is that what we're doing here?
Yep. So if you just go back for a second and you click on that, on any concept, once again, we split our questions up by concept. So this concept has a little edit option. I can click on that. And then you can see your questions. You can check and uncheck them, expand them to preview what they would look like, etc. So that should take care of that piece for now. But definitely check out, as I said, check out that other webinar for all the nitty-gritty pieces on that.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll probably see some of you this afternoon. And wait, we got one more question. We've got some thanks and a yay, which is appreciated. And then let's answer this last question of, do assignments drop off or do you remove them?
So within your group option, you'll be able to see them. We're not kind of pulling them from our system place, so you could use them again in a future class if you wanted to do so. We have work to do a little bit of organization options within the group in order to kind of search by or like sort based on the most recent due date. And we'll continue to work on options for ease of access for older assignments. But we're not, as a system, removing your assignments from your groups.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. We are going to go ahead and sign off. We'll see y'all later. Bye, thanks.